Judaism, the 11th most practiced religion in the world, and one of the oldest still existing. But how did it achieve the legacy it has today? Before Judaism, Mesopotamia was littered with a variety of several polytheistic religions. The Arabian Peninsula, at the time, had no major religion. Prayers were offered to idols of the moon, sun, and other deities, which were distant and couldn't talk directly with their subjects. In this time, a young boy by the name of Abram was born in the city of Ur, now modern-day Iraq. Son of Tarik, an idol merchant, he questioned his father's fate from a very early age, once smashing all the idols in his father's store. Eventually, the one true God Abram had worshipped appeared to him and told him to go to the land of Canaan, where he would be blessed and made a great nation.
Abraham's father and his family, they believed that God was many, that there were many gods. They believed in what is called a polytheism. But Abraham really took to his heart, took to his mind this idea that there is one God, a monotheistic God, just one God in heaven and in earth. And the tradition says that God called to Abraham and God said, "Abraham, go forth." And Abraham did what we sometimes don't do. He heard that voice and he took it seriously. He thought to himself, well, what does it mean for me to serve a God?
Several years after Abram arrived, God gave Abram a son, Isaac, in which he would establish a covenant with God. But in order for Abram to fulfill the covenant, he must overcome his greatest trial yet, sacrificing his now teenage son, Isaac.
The books of wisdom of the Jewish people have much insight into Abraham and why he was chosen specifically, primarily because he showed complete dedication to God, to the extent that he was willing to stand up to the forces, the powers that be at the time.
However, an angel appeared to him as he was about to sacrifice his son and told him to yield, for by showing his faith he had fulfilled the covenant. By fulfilling the covenant, God changed Abram's name to Abraham, a father of many nations and a father of the Jews.
When you ask me what this covenant means, I think it means really the core of what it means to be a Jew. We have to hear God's voice. We have to be willing to go forth and go forward. And we have to understand that we have a very particular responsibility in this world. Not just to be ones who sit back and expect goodness to come to us, but people who understand in our hearts and minds through our learning and through our interaction that our job is to bring goodness and blessing to others. That covenant says, go forth and be a blessing, and I take that very seriously.
Several hundreds of years after Abraham's time, at a time when thousands of Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, a boy named Moses was adopted into royalty by the Pharaoh's daughter. He was raised in the royal courts and treated as such. People would bow down to him as he walked Egypt's roads. However, as his real parents were slaves, it pained Moses to see his kin endure such torture by the Egyptians. He went east to the land of Midian when the Pharaoh learned of Moses' displays of affection towards the Jews. From then on, Moses worked as a shepherd in Midian for 40 years, until one day he was met with a twist of unexpected fate.
What happened was, he was feeding his sheep, he was taking them out to pasture, and one little sheep ran off somewhere off on the side. And the sheep ran off, and it's going off, it's wandering away from the rest of the herd, so he ran after the sheep, this one individual sheep, and he chased it, and that's where he found it, right at this burning bush. It led him to this bush. So the point is that his concern for the individual, for the single lost sheep, is what demonstrated his his being appropriate, his suitability for the job.
At this point, God spoke to him through this burning bush. He told Moses to go to Egypt and tell the Pharaoh, "The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, and to let the Jewish people go." Moses immediately made his way to Egypt, where he gathered the Jewish people in front of the Pharaoh and repeated the words that God had spoken to him. Despite Moses' repeated threats of deadly plagues that he shall send upon the land, the Pharaoh was reluctant to release his slaves. At his constant warnings, Moses cast 10 plagues upon Egypt, such as turning the dust to lice and the rivers to blood. But even after this, the Pharaoh persisted in his stubbornness. Therefore, Moses unleashed the final plague upon Egypt, killing each family's firstborn. After the Pharaoh had his only child killed by the angel of death, he released the Jews. At this time, the Jews celebrated the first of what is called Passover, which is still celebrated by Jews to this day. The next day, the Jews made their way to the Promised Land, the land of milk and honey Moses had promised to the Jews. But on their journey, the Pharaoh had decided to go recapture the Jews. The Egyptians had nearly caught up with Moses when they cornered them against the Red Sea. With the power God had entrusted in Moses' staff, Moses parted the Red Sea for his people and left for the Promised Land. Months afterwards, Moses had arrived at where God had led him to, Mount Sinai. There, he left his followers behind while he spent 3 days traversing the mountain to talk to God. It was when Moses reached the summit of Mount Sinai that the defining moment of Judaism was created. As Moses approached God, he and the millions of witnesses below saw the giving of what is called the Oral Torah, and the 2 tablets that today make up what is known as the 10 Commandments.
The Torah includes various segments. The Torah includes historical narrative, a little bit of history here and there. It includes essential revelation narratives of Moses at Mount Sinai, the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, 10 Commandments, things like that. Then there's also laws. There's instructions, mitzvahs. It's called in Hebrew mitzvah. The Hebrew word mitzvah has 2 meanings. First is simplest, most basic, literal meaning is commandment. It comes from the Hebrew word tzivui, which means a commandment. And then there's the understanding of the word mitzvah, which is connected to the word tzavta, which tzavta means like a group or a connection. So mitzvah forms a connection, a point of connection between an individual, a human being, and God. To say that I'm going to, as a human being, connect to God, it's virtually impossible. There's one way. The one way to do it is through mitzvahs. A mitzvah is a commandment from God. It's also an ability to connect. Every mitzvah is a point of connection. So the Torah has 613 mitzvot. All of those things are written in the Torah in a very, very succinct form, very, very basic, just almost like the Cliff Notes. Okay? There aren't details, exactly what it should be done, exactly how it should be done. And that, all of those details came from Moses. Without what Moses taught the Jewish people, we have no idea what the text even says. We have no idea what it's referring to. They have no idea how to observe even the most basic Jewish precept.
Despite being one of the most witnessed events in religious history, over time it became one of the most controversial events in Jewish history. Within recent years, different interpretations among the Jewish community of what actually happened on Mount Sinai have caused divisions among the Jewish community. These divides have separated Jewish followers into 4 different denominations: Orthodox, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and Reform.
There are
basically four denominations that are called Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist. And the difference primarily has to do with understandings of what happened at Mount Sinai and how that influences the way we should live our lives. The traditional Jewish view, which continues in Orthodox Judaism, is that at Mount Sinai, God gave the entire Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and also many teachings called the oral Torah that were passed down from one generation of rabbi to another. And they believe that as part of that oral Torah that was given at Mount Sinai, there was a very detailed set of rules about how we're to live our lives. And so for them, the Judaism is very much about living according to those traditional rules. Other strands of Judaism either believe that much less happened at Mount Sinai, that it was just a presence or deep spiritual experience, or some believe that the whole story of the Torah is more of a tradition and a memory and a literature of the Jewish people. The Reform, which is what we are, is the least traditional, the least rigorous, and you'll find people here who believe anywhere from my belief, which is that the entire Torah was given at Mount Sinai, but it was not necessarily understood and written down properly, and so many of the laws and rituals come out of a human understanding of it, to many people in the congregation who believe that it's more of the national literature of the Jewish people. And what that affects is what kind of life you live and why you live that kind of life.
But no matter what denomination you're from, whether you follow the mitzvot or not, or whether you celebrate the Sabbath, Judaism is at its core a legacy, the legacy of Moses, which still continues to this day.